Hello, welcome back to a YouTube video. Today I'm doing a 25.20 support tier list, served your content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. Like the ADC role, there were very little changes towards the support role this patch. This patch was light as they wanted to make it so things weren't too volatile going into Worlds. 24.19 was the last time we actually saw a direct support change, and that was a buff towards Brand and Seraphine. They ended up benefiting quite nicely from their buffs. Indirectly, we saw things like LeBlanc and Mel get buffed through, just power for mid. That does help them support, and both of them were doing a bit better for it. Likewise, this patch, Malphite and Veigar got slight buffs. In the case of Malphite, he was quite far away. Veigar support isn't good, but it's not horrible, and the buff this patch does enable him to get more power early on into the game, so that does help him in this role. He is commonly paired alongside Ziggs, I mentioned this quite a bit, and the pairing doesn't perform that well. In fact, he actually performs quite a bit better with other things for the most part. I am going to be bumping up to the C tier from the D tier though, as I do think the champion is performing a bit better. I still don't recommend it. It's not really worth investing time into. But if you were if you're reminiscent of like Veigar of old, or you just want to play the champion, then I think he becomes a bit more of an option, albeit not a particularly good one. Outside of that, the D tier stays the same. We have Twitch, Malphite, and Ashe. In the case of Malphite's buffs, he also isn't like horrifically far away from being playable in the support role. It's not good like Veigar, but it's like it's not it's not Ashe Twitch kind of levels are far away at the moment. Both Ashe and Twitch are very far. They've obviously had previous iterations which have worked. Right now the item system just doesn't really support it. Plus they've had like changes to kind of push them away from being like functional support options. In the C tier, obviously I'm bumping Veigar up. He is performing slightly better at the moment. The other picks still remain the same. The likes of Yuumi, just performing quite badly at the moment. Direct nerfs to her 2 patches in a row have left her in a pretty dire spot. She's just not that good generally. You're sacrificing a lot when you're picking a champion like Yuumi, whether that's lane agency, overall just map control, and right now she just doesn't give back enough to really make up for the amount of sacrifice she is. In the case of Renata, she hasn't really been that amazing for solo queue for a while now. I think as a niche counter pick, you can make her work. She, I would say, is a slight tier away from like Yuumi and Veigar. Yuumi and Veigar are like the bottom of the C tier. I think Renata in the right spots can definitely work, but no one really plays her, and because of that, most people have low mastery on her, so it's not the kind of champion you can just opt into and like expect to work you. You really need to know how to play Renata to like make use of like the damage she can do in laning phase with like the shared damage on the passive. It's not really that considering. I wouldn't consider it too much at the moment, so I do have her within the C tier. And then Mel performs a lot better if you just maxi. That's the main gist of Mel at the moment. She's basically a tier higher in all 3 of her roles. If you put points in E, people still max Q, and it just performs like 2% worse. So that is like a genuine power shift. In the B tier, then we still have the likes of Tarm, who isn't a pick I particularly recommend at the moment. He's too gold heavy for what you want as a support. Like, you want to go Heartsteel on him at the moment, and that costs a lot. Like, you want to, and for that, you kind of need to be like more aggressive as a support option. If you play him purely as a defensive support, he's just not that good. That's kind of the issue with him at the moment. So it's why he doesn't really see that much comp. I mean, if any comp at the moment, combined with the fact that his solo queue performance is just not that great. Galio, I think, as a situational counter pick, can be fine. He did get nerfed more recently, and it's kind of just left him towards the bottom of the B tier. He also just has the issue where the item system just doesn't support him that well, and it's the same for Shen. I think both these picks as conditional counters can be pretty solid, like as like an answer to maybe Leona in the case of Shen. I think there's like genuine value to that, but outside of that, I just wouldn't really recommend it. And if you haven't put the time into them, it's just they're kind of non-considered picks. Like, you wouldn't really consider them. I mean, Moo's recent buffs helped him. He also has the issue where the item system just isn't like great for him. I see people do like standard support, and I see people do like the more offensive like Leandry variant, which I think if you're like consistent at snowballing can definitely work. He's definitely performing a lot better now, and I would say he's like a legitimate flex option. He's easy to play, pairs nicely with like your MFs and your Samiras, good into compositions which are punished quite by his like AoE lockdown. I think there's like value in that regard. Swain, I'm not that big on Swain. I think he's also quite gold heavy. You'll find that with a lot of the lower down B tier supporters, they need a lot of gold and traditionally can't easily access that gold like themselves. That's like the difference between like your Swains and like your Elises and LeBlancs. I think Elise and LeBlanc have a lot easier time accessing gold, and they can usually snowball their advantages. Whereas like Swain, for example, you don't really do quite as much damage. But I think he's definitely not as bad as he has been in previous iterations. He sits as like an alright B tier option. Fiddlesticks, you can still go the low econ Trailblazer Fiddlesticks variant, and it still works. It's not incredible anymore though, and he's definitely lost some like genuine power in that build. That being said though, his CC and his ult are still very strong, and like the fact that he can be so oppressive in the right spots does give him genuine value, so he does maintain his spot within the beta, and honestly he probably sits towards the high end of the beta. Like he has value. Teemo is legitimately like a decent pick within mid to low MMR brackets. People allow him to kind of get away like being relatively non-punished, and as like a unique counter pick, I think there's like genuine value to it. Obviously people will think you're trolling when you lock this in, so it might not be the pick you always want to be pulling out, but I think if you genuinely know your spots and like you want to play him every so often, he's a pretty solid option, and yeah, does perform quite good in the lower brackets where his scaling is usually a bit more consistent. People won't sweep for your shrooms, and generally your blind is just going to provide so much value that yeah, I have him within the beta at the moment. Blitzcrank sits within the beta. He is, I don't think he's bad. He's not amazing though at the moment. He's definitely he's where would I put him? He's just not consistent. I think that's just the issue with Blitzcrank. Like, I think if you find the right compositions you want to play him into, like, you know you can get like a good consistent or like free hook targets, and you feel confident on the champion, and you understand how to kind of apply pressure. I think there is like value to the champion. Obviously, that requires some level of understanding of him. Like, if you're not that comfortable on him, you kind of just opt into him. I think there are better options these days. Like, Blitzcrank of old was a lot more like a 53% just generally pretty tanky champion, but he's lost a lot of power, and he generally just isn't quite that anymore. You kind of want to be selective with the spots where you play him. Maokai, I used to be a bit of a fan of Maokai support. I think he used to have a lot of value, and I still think he does have some value. Obviously, like your Trailblazer, tanky Maokai, where you're providing vision with your saplings, your ult is a really good peeling tool, and your CC can be quite nice, but he has the issue where he doesn't have a particularly good mastery curve. Like, he's not a champion you really want to invest a lot of time into, and I think that makes him a bit more undesirable. Like, I like champions which I think you can kind of like build into, and like recommending that because they have like good situations or yeah, just good mastery curves. Maokai doesn't really have that. I think if you just want to opt into him and like you know the spots where he can work, then I think it's fine. But if you just want like a genuine champion where you can put some time into them and like really master them, he's not that. Pyke sits from the beta. Pyke is a champion which is really good to sink time into. Pyke can be a really oppressive champion, very early game skewed, very elite skewed in that regard, and that makes him like not as recommendable for average Edo brackets. But if you enjoy the archetype, you want a bit more agency for yourself in the support role, I think he's one of the best options. He is harder to execute though, and I think there are maybe some slightly better like individual agency. Maybe, I mean, some of them do have hard to execute like thresholds, like yeah, like your LeBlancs and Elises. But I think they're slightly better at the moment. Not by a large margin, but very, very slightly. Pantheon, I dropped him down to the B tier. I think he's less, he doesn't have the mastery curve of the Pyke, but he's got a lower barrier to entry. If you're looking for an AD support, I think he can sit quite nicely as an option. He's probably not my number one. I think Senna probably takes that for the moment. But he's definitely like, I mean, they're all around the like low A, like high B tier kind of area where if you have the like mastery in them or you're very comfortable in them, they can definitely work in the right spots. Lux, Xerath, Hui, all like these, I'd say pretty solid artillery options where if you're comfortable in them, they can be pretty good. I think Lux is the best of the three for support. Not Vel'Koz. Xerath has definitely had some of his power shifted more into levels, which has made him a bit better of a mid laner, but it's definitely not quite the same like power in support. Hui has a bit more of a barrier to entry, but I don't think he's a bad option. Lux is has the lowest barrier to entry of the three. Also probably there's just like, in my regard is the simplest. But it's very predicated on snowballing. Like, you need to snowball on this champion. If you fall behind or you're just not that comfortable pushing advantages, she ends up just being a worse option than some of the other champions. Zoe, I also kind of have her around this area as like an AP carry option. Her issue is like her barrier to entry, but I still think she can be a really good support option. She is also reliant on snowballing, as are a lot of the like aggressive AP options where you need to really spike on like your Lost Chapter, get your Dark Steel stacks, get your first item, your second item as quick as possible, kind of just like take over the game through that. Whereas if you fall behind, you're stuck on like your first item components, you're like more reliant on your CC and like other people doing things, which it can be fine in certain situations, but isn't a consistent way of winning. Nico has a high barrier to entry. I think she's still a really good support option, but is early game skewed, and you need to understand her W. Like, there's so much power in her W at the moment. Utilizing it to block like damage, utilizing it to effectively like scout and like provide vision. It's a very powerful ability, and it makes it very impressive and competitive, especially with like that early game skew where you've got a lot of power in your laning. But for like average elo, it's not gonna be exploited quite as much, and that really marks her down quite a bit. So she's just hitting the B tier at the moment. And then Rel, I still really like Rel as an option. I think she's a really nice to recommend pick. It's like an engaged support option, but she's lost genuine power. They nerfed her like 2 patches in a row, and she is definitely a lot less durable. She's also lost a lot of her player base, which is kind of I guess concerning to see. Like, she actually like definitely one of the like what you'd consider kind of mainstream support options has like lost a lot of that player base. So still at the top of the B tier though. I still think she can be really good in the right spots, but you do want to be a bit more comfortable on the champion if you're just playing her at the moment. Seraphine, her recent buffs really helped her. She now sits as like a solid A tier option. She's not one of the best supports in the game, but she provides a lot of different like tools, whether that's CC, the shield and healing, just general damage. She's got a lot of things going for her, and generally when she's weak, she ends up being like this jack of all trades, not really good at anything. And when she's strong, she's usually got like 1 or 2 of her abilities which feel quite good, and generally she pairs quite nicely with some of the like MFs and Ashes of this world, where your large kind of like AoE damage can like support their kind of kit, and can be quite valuable. So I do have her within the A tier at the moment. Senna sits within the A tier. Both the I say AP, like the Enchanter variant and the like more utility variant with like the Cleaver are both viable at the moment. I think it just depends what you need within the game. I don't think she's one of the best support options, but like having that level of flexibility can be quite nice. And if you're comfortable with the champion, she's definitely like rewarding to put time into. But she sits towards the end of the A tier. I don't think she's one of the like I wouldn't recommend her as like one of the premier supports. It's just like if you're comfortable with her, she can definitely be quite valuable at the moment. Morgana, I can't stand recommending this champion, but there's no doubt about the fact that she's pretty solid for average elos at the moment. Recent buffs to her have really helped her consistency. She's being nerfed in 25.21 and will probably drop back down to the B tier because she's going to be losing some level of durability, which will generally just make her a bit squishier in certain instances. But yeah, she generally has just gotten a bit more consistent as of recent, which has like helped her. So sits within the A tier at the moment, but is being nerfed in the next patch. Lulu has received like 5 patches worth of nerfs over like the last 15, something like that. It's crazy, and she still sits as a pretty relevant support. The overall nerfs have not done a huge amount to her. They've been like relatively like small tap downs over time, but yeah, sits within the A tier. I think she pairs quite nicely with the kind of ADCs which like value that kind of enchanter. I wouldn't play her broadly. I think she definitely struggles with certain things and has lost power. Like you need to be some level of comfortable with like how you can bully some people out of lane with this pick. But generally she's still a pretty solid option. Boom, great counter pick. Definitely lost some of that like general. You can't blind him. You couldn't blind him before, like even when he was like pre-double nerfed, but now while he's been double nerfed, I would recommend just exclusively using him as a counter pick, and in that regard he's a really good counter pick still. So play him into like your engage options, which just don't really have the tools to kind of where he has like the tools to kind of deny them from really like operating how they would want to in most situations. The other like general support options are still all here, like your Alis, your Rakans. I think these picks can all be really good in the right situations. Where's Rakan? Where if you're very comfortable on like your engage archetype, they can provide a lot of CC for the team, and generally they're just really good options. I have Nautilus in that boat as well. I actually mentioned in my last comment section, but I think Nautilus is a great blind champion. If you're banning out something like the Braum, he does quite well into like the kind of like overall support infrastructure at the moment. That being said, if you want like a general enchanter pick, something like a Nami can be really good at the moment, which is why I have it with Niesta, and generally enchanters perform a bit better within solo queue at the moment because a lot of these engage supports have been nerfed because of their competitive presence. Silas, I've just realized I've missed. He sits within the C tier. He's like a niche counter pick. Like if you know you can get some good ultimates within the game and you're very comfortable on the pick, you can play him. Outside of that, I don't really recommend him. He kind of becomes a bit of a non-factor. Shaco, have him within the A tier. He's a niche option, and honestly, if you're not like comfortable with him, I wouldn't like play him. You do need to understand how to kind of exploit his invisibility, trap placements, and that has, you usually only see it played by OTPs, and that is for like a particular reason. That being said though, I think it's really good, and if you're comfortable with it, then it can be quite a valuable option. Tarek, Zillion, other niche support options, which I think if you're very comfortable with them, can be really good. Generally, yeah, they're good time investments, because most people won't understand how to play against them or really punish them. But if you're looking for something a bit more broad, then yeah, your Nautilus, Fracans, Ali, Braums, once again, will probably be the main kind of way you go. But having one of these picks can be quite oppressive, either for if you're playing competitive, drawing bans, and for solo queue, just generally winning games would be pretty good. Poppy, also still a really good like counter pick option into like a blind rail or a blind or just some of like the blind engage options. Alistar, for example, she can be really oppressive. Don't like blind her. She can be really punished by some of the enchanter options and not really get enough value. But if Poppy W is going to get value within the game, then yeah, she's still a really effective option. And Horde's a very powerful tool for like what she can provide as a support. UAP options are still like floating around here. Yeah, I think Vel'Koz is a great pick, and recent buffs to him have really helped him kind of stand up as like probably the #1 artillery mage support. Maybe not like the #1 AP support. I think there's like loads of other options like floating around at the moment. Nidalee doesn't really fall into that like AP support category. She actually plays more like an enchanter, and Nidalee support is genuinely like incredibly strong. She's like the sleeper OP pick of the list still. People don't play her, but people acknowledge the fact that she's really strong, and that E ability, like the 7-second 80% attack speed steroid, is absurd. I can't state this enough that if you are comfortable with the champion, she is probably the #1 support option at the moment. Like, she's just that worth investing time into. Maybe Bard in Elite, but she's close. She's definitely at the top of the, towards the top of the list. The other AP options include the likes of Elise and LeBlanc, who recent LeBlanc buffs really helped her push her back to being quite nice alongside Elise. But both these picks are quite well known as being pretty sleeper good support options. Sleeper is kind of fake in this term because they're just known. Elise, great for early game snowballing, early game objective fights, general diving. She just has a lot of clear strengths, and you don't really need to worry about clearing and some of the mental attacks that jungle provides. So playing her support just ends up being easier. Same goes for LeBlanc. You don't need to focus on CSing. It's just about executing your combo. They do have a barrier to entry, and if you're not comfortable with them, then you probably look towards other things, but they are worth putting time into. Playing at least one of these is really, really valuable. Brand, towards the top of the A tier. He's probably the #2, just general, average elo support again, which is nice to see. I think Brand should be towards the top of the list. He's relatively easy to execute. He's also relatively, harmless towards to have towards the top, because obviously he doesn't really take over Elite in any huge capacity. And yeah, recent buffs really helped him, so sits towards the top of the A tier again. And then your two kind of they're basically S tier and Elite, Fresh and Bard. They're incredibly good if you have mastery into them, which is why I still have them towards the top of the A tier, because I recommend sinking time into these picks, because yeah, generally if you can play a Bard, Fresh, an Elise, you have a Nidalee, you have a Zillion or Attack, and when you play some of the more broad options, you're in such a good position to just generally climb and have such a wide variety of supports to kind of opt into. And that's not even mentioning the enchanters within the S tier. If you can play a Karma, or you can play an Engage a Leona, or you can play I don't know, like a good Jana, then there's so many opportunities at the moment, and I think I cannot understate that enough, like just how valuable that can be. Zyra is my number one AP support option. She performs really well for average Elo brackets, and recent buffs to her just generally like solidified her as being the S tier pick. Leona's my number one engage, very low barrier to entry, and generally pretty good at the moment. Other champions around her got nerfed. She had mana cost buffs, and that helped her, so yeah, sits within the S tier at the moment. Karma, performing really well. This is the 3 points Q Enchanter variant, which generally gives her a lot more scaling capability, whilst continuing to hold some of that lane bullying functionality. Makes her very, like, solid as an option in that regard. Some of your enchanters include like Jana, who's a great counter pick option. I don't recommend blinding her because she does struggle with certain ADCs and does struggle into certain archetypes, but into like dive, where you can utilize your ult and your Q effectively as like peeling tools, and your ADC really benefits from the AD surge on the E. She's an incredible pick in that regard. Sona, I don't like Sona. Generally, like, I think people really misuse this champion, but if you understand the spots where you can play her, and you understand that you can get away, like, some of the things you can get away with, and you're not really punished, she is one of the best mid-game enchanters, like, mid to late game enchanters. Like, I think people overvalue her scaling and undervalue how good she can be on, like, the mid-game spike when you have, like, your fully stacked Crescendo. It's really oppressive, the things she can do, so I still recommend her as an S tier option. Soraka maintains the support within the S tier. Really good, just general enchanter option. Pairs quite nicely with a lot of things. Milio, also another general kind of enchanter option. His W can pair really nicely with certain ADCs. He's not as broad as like a Soraka, but generally he performs incredibly well within average Elo brackets. He just doesn't have a particularly deep mastery curve. He's pretty shallow in that regard. And Nami is my number one in the S tier. Performs just generally really well at the moment because she is probably the enchanter which is the most broad, functions well with mages, which generally most enchanters don't. She also just generally functions quite well with like some of the like specific ADCs like your Lucians and your Corkis, but more broadly can just functions with like your MFs, your Caitlyn's, but not like your preferred archetype, but generally she still performs quite well with them in average bracket, so I still recommend her as like the number one enchanter at the moment. But I do think like it just comes down to comfort. It's like, what do you feel comfortable playing within the S and the A tier? Like, do you have the mastery within the champion, and like how many games have you put into them? Are you comfortable with them? It's all very important in that regard, and I don't think there's a huge amount of like the gap between like the S and honestly like even the B tier isn't massive. It does just come down to your comfort and like how you kind of operate and where you play that champion. So those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one. Goodbye.